Almost a genre of its own at this point, the retro throwback or spiritual successor has become an exhausting sight. I'm not even saying that all the games that comprise this category are bad. There are several that are straight up great. Shovel Knight, in the sense that it borrows much from NES action platformers like DuckTales and Mega Man, Bloodstained, Yooka-Laylee is fine, and its 2D Donkey Kong Country clone is surprisingly good, A Hat in Time in a very vague sense, and so on and so on. Crow Country is one of those games, but while it wears its heart on its sleeve with gameplay that takes heavily from Resident Evil and a plotline and aesthetic that resemble the best of Silent Hill, it not only masterfully homages and plays with the tropes of the genre, but also frequently finds times and places to forge its own path in both directions. Crow Country is still a new game, released in May of 2024, and was developed by SFB Games, a pair of brothers who have developed games as a duo as Super Flash Bros for a number of years, originally through Newgrounds and Armor Games, although had a fairly big breakout a few years back with Snipperclips, which was published by Nintendo as a Switch exclusive, and which has a lot of push behind it because of that. Currently, Crow Country is on PC, PS5, and Xbox Series consoles, although I would be surprised if it never came to Switch, given it's a game that definitely could run on it, so we'll see if this line ages like milk. Crow Country is a slightly different take on the Resident Evil survival horror, primarily in its camera angle, which is set at an angle at the edge of top-down, but also not on rails as Resident Evil 1 was, and instead freely controllable like a third-person camera, although the free movement is also a bit different. On a controller you can use the D-pad for tank controls if you really want that classic feel though, and the game's aesthetics definitely make you want to try, although the analog controls are so smooth it's hard not to abuse them. Combat falls much in line with Resident Evil's. Bullets are a somewhat limited resource, all reloading needs to be done manually, and aiming holds you still, although the protagonist, Mara, has a bit of a jitter to her aim, and deals more damage the closer she is for a bit of risk versus reward thing. Bullets are hypothetically scarce, although the game works very hard to subtly keep you topped off. Most rooms are loaded with hidden ammo to find, but also trash cans and vending machines spit it out on occasion, and seem to refresh with more when you're really running low, and kicking a vending machine 10 times seems to always give you an extremely powerful grenade, and all this stuff also applies to medkits. There are also some infinite supplies, pistol bullets in Mara's car, and medkits in a late game area, although these are only accessible from dead empty. It's an understandable concession on some level to attempt to prevent soft locks, but it does feel like it misses the point some. Without the pressure of running out, the threat of enemies is lessened, even if they can kill you pretty fast, and it promotes being aggressive instead of thoughtful conservation of resources, and it's even sillier as there's a story-based mode in this game, which removes all enemies for those who specifically don't want a survival horror experience anyway, although I imagine hard mode actually does force some classic resource play. Enemies do respawn, so to some extent, pure resource management is difficult to balance, but it is a weak point in the game that's otherwise pretty amazing. Combat does feel good outside of this issue too. There's about 10 enemy types who all have slight differences, although the solution to fighting them is largely the same. And there are also 4 mini-bosses who you fight in sealed rooms, with the options to spend a heavy amount of resources to take them down, usually grenades, or to solve a puzzle while being chased around by them to escape them entirely, plus 1 mandatory boss near the end who you cannot escape from. For a good portion of the game, Mara only has the pistol, which is fairly low damage, but deals significantly more with close-range headshots, and wrangling the aiming to do so feels great. And she also eventually gets the shotgun, which is obviously much stronger but only holds 2 rounds, and has an even lower maximum range, and 2 secret weapons can also be found. The Magnum and the Flamethrower, which actually do have limited ammo, as it can only be found via secrets, making these absolute killing machines extreme last resorts. The secrets themselves are quite cool, and maybe the most fun part of the game, with 15 of them hidden throughout the entire map, behind extremely tough puzzles, and which give crazy and silly rewards, from the Magnum and Flamethrower to little mushroom fairies who give each weapon an upgrade, damage for the pistol and Magnum, range for the Flamethrower, and ammunition capacity for the shotgun, plus running shoes which increase the speed of Mara's run in general. On that topic, the exploration is what makes this game truly special, I think. The theme park, Crow Country, is a pretty genius setting. It offers a ton of variety in itself, with several areas that each have their own identity, a haunted house with a dungeon, which has puzzles based around the creatures locked in its cells, a spooky mansion with some classic Silent Hill piano puzzles, there's an underwater themed area with a dark ride, and a fairy tale area with mushroom men and swan boats, plus plenty of maintenance areas, back rooms, and an elaborate underground area. There's also a wide variety of key items to pick up, and each one sees a variety of uses, so none of them ever feel like they're taking up space, although there isn't really a limited inventory in this game, unfortunately. The bronze key opens 5 or 6 doors, as do the silver and gold ones. The floppy disk can activate 4 or 5 terminals found throughout the game, and so on, and the game does a great job of letting you find places these items can be used before you get them. For example, before you obtain the bronze key, you'll likely have found most of the places it can be used, and diegetic staff memos littered throughout the game offer hints to things that are usually in the distant future, like, oh, if you need the crank, I took it to X place to use it, which means if you're paying attention, you should always have several spots ready to check as you progress, guiding you extremely well and subtly without feeling overly handholdy. On the other hand, the gamer tip magazines could probably be removed, I think, as they're both less diegetic, but also spoil a lot of mechanical stuff that you would figure out through experimentation and just playing the game, like going for headshots, breaking boxes for loot, and spoiling a few weapons you get later, or even the secret weapons, which feels a little handholdy in a way that the game usually avoids. The puzzles themselves are also really good. Beyond the collecting items, there's a bunch of small unique puzzles, each with their own mechanics and tricks. I don't want to ruin too many, but some I found extremely clever were the trains, a simple logic puzzle involving the models of the trains that pass by, but which has a layer of abstraction that makes it a fun brain teaser. Ophelia's Grave, which is a very clever extension of a puzzle from earlier in the game, and the Octopus Code, which is a very, very silly thing to find. I love stumbling around Crow Country. While the combat stuff is just decent, if a tiny bit undercooked and easy, especially if you farm grenades, the world and puzzles and just running around it and exploring is some of the most fun I've had in a game world in a while. And that's all enhanced with incredible presentation. For one, there's the elephants in the room. This is very much meant to look like a PlayStation 1 game. It doesn't copy every quirk of that system, the usually wonky shifting textures are absent, but the game is very obviously an homage to the era. Before you move the camera, the world is lit and presented in a way that very much gives the illusion of being pre-rendered, the same way Resident Evil is, but somehow it's full 3D. I'm not entirely positive what tricks are used to achieve this, something with the lighting and the depth of field I think, that give it an illusion of being slightly separate from the 3D models in the way that pre-rendered backgrounds are, and I'm crazy for it. Mara's model and those of other characters are interesting, primarily because its main inspirations, Resident Evil and Silent Hill, use pretty detailed and realistic character models, even though there are very few of them. The characters here are instead chunky, chibi, lack detail, even mouths, much more like Final Fantasy VII. I find them very cute, don't get me wrong, and they give the game a style all its own, but it does feel a bit incongruent, especially with so many fantastic looking enemies rendered realistically, with thin, grotesque limbs and all sorts of warped faces. Crow Country itself is quite gorgeous throughout too. I mentioned its variety some already, but it's all pretty great. The whole place feels real. You can learn its paths, you can find new ones, and immediately visualize where the other end spits you out. There's a variety via the different themed areas, and the deeper you get, the weirder and more unhinged it gets, culminating in the basement, but that's later. There's also a surprising amount of effective scares. The game builds tension well, despite being easy, by way of the constantly increasing amount of enemies as you progress, and pays it off pretty constantly. It's not a game of direct jump scares or anything, but sometimes you'll be running across a previously safe area and come face to face with a wild-looking new enemy, or open a crate and see nothing come out, only to pass it 20 minutes later, feeling secure, just to have the box explode and something pops out, or to walk down a hallway and have spiders burst from a vent. It's surprisingly good at catching you off guard, and has some great existential and body horror stuff as you learn more about the guests, the extremely cynical name that the owner of the park has given to the creatures, which recontextualizes a lot of the game, and is a bit to think about after it. The sound is really clean as well. Music is soft and haunting, but also obviously synthetic, sometimes straight up having synthesizers as primary instruments, but never in a way that's poppy or game music-y. It's very much like the music in a Silent Hill game, but the synthiness also calls to mind the music of John Carpenter, which is extremely fitting for the designs of the monsters, and the monsters all make odd screams and chants, not intelligible or human, but like something out of a nightmare. And the guns are extremely satisfying to shoot as well, thanks to some nice bangs and pops. The story is also, I think, fantastic, even told as it is, primarily through notes and memos, although Mara does meet several survivors who make the world a little less lonely and similarly expand the story. From the get-go, it's clear Mara is being evasive about stuff, as are Mr. Crow, who attempted to cover up the true purpose of Crow Country, and even more so the true nature of the guests as it becomes clear to him, and this extends to all the other characters you meet who are also evasive and have their own secrets to hide, and all of that slowly unfolds and opens up throughout the game in a really neat way. With all that laid out, play Crow Country. If it sounds like your thing, if you love Resident Evil and Silent Hill, The Thing, horror in general, you're gonna love Crow Country. The less you know, the better, honestly, so if this sounds like your jam, support an indie dev, check it out. Anyway, I want to talk about some stuff, the story mostly, but also a few cool things mixed in, so go on. Play it. I love the evolving mysteries of Crow Country. Off the bat, Mario is a little odd, and the game does a great job of planting hints. Following her monologue where she states her name and her mission, she's pretty steadfast about her determination to get to the bottom of the park, literally. But it eventually becomes obvious that she's not the secret agent she claims she is.
Whoa, what?
Grant the Hero Fan?
What are you doing to my show?
Hello, NTMA Productions. I want you to play Crow Country for the PS5.
Usually the mark of a good twist is that it makes you want to re-experience the story, to comb through the details to see what is recontextualized, and things that seemed innocuous on your first watch suddenly become some of the most notable parts of the story. Crow Country's main twist, I'm Grant, by the way. Grant the Hierophant. Crow Country's main twist was that Mara is not actually who she says she is, and is actually Elaine, the girl that was bit at the park 2 years prior. This is a great twist specifically because it's not hard to guess, but all of the hints that were dropped are so unbelievably easy to overlook. People aren't going to think twice about Mara's speech in the beginning, thinking it's a rookie detective who's trying to steal her nerves before she goes into a scary abandoned park, when it's actually just Elaine trying to get her alias straight before anyone puts any scrutiny against it. Cigarette machines also provide the hint that Mara isn't who she says she is. But the way the text prompt is framed could be taken two ways as well. I'm not allowed. Either the agency she works for doesn't allow her to smoke on the job, which is a fair restriction put on some workers if their job demands focus, or she's not old enough, and her gut response to being offered cigarettes is to reject them, presumably like her parents would have told her to do. This only works as a hint to the twist because there's more than one cigarette machine dotted around. If you're not paying attention, you'll brush it off as the former. But you may inspect every machine to see if there's unique dialogue or a puzzle element in one, which in turn forces you to think about the phrasing each time. There are other moments with similar vibes to them. One of the secrets you can find are a pair of running shoes in Edward's car that are a gift for his daughter, who, according to the note, would have been 17 when the gift was presented. Elaine remarks that the shoes fit her perfectly, a subtle hint that she's 17 herself. When rummaging through the gift shop, you can look at those little license plates with your name on them, and she very tellingly looks at names that begin with the letter E, not M. She's physically shorter than the adults in the plot, and her head is too large for her body, just like a teenager. This is not to mention the picture that the lawyer brings to the park to present to Edward Crow. It suspiciously looks like Mara with different hair and clothes. A player could brush it off as the developer not wanting to make an entirely new character model for one small story element. You're given ample opportunity to suss out the twist beforehand, and it's satisfying to finally figure it out before the game has a chance to pull the curtain up and reveal it. All of the hints are obfuscated through obviousness. They're so in your face that they become utterly camouflaged by their bluntness. Only in a puzzle game could you hide the details so perfectly in plain sight, where a player will scour any given room for puzzle elements, scrutinize memos and map details, perhaps discarding some information as irrelevant to the puzzle, and actually overlooking the elements to a story-wide puzzle. And that's why Crow Country's twist is so great. It fits well for a puzzle game to have such a puzzle from the start. Hell, you can even figure out Mara is lying about who she is and works for in the first room of the game if you look at her ID in your inventory and read the police report on the hood of your car. Your ID number matches the police officer's ID number. Me and Aiden felt like big brain geniuses when we figured it out. Wait, hold on.
We need the fairy.
What's her name? Mara, but she checked for E-names. That's okay, that's good. And that moment was one of my favorite parts of the playthrough. It could also be that since we had to use our brains to do the puzzles, that we were in a problem-solving kind of mood, which may have kept us more on guard about plot details, but I'd like to think most people figured out the twist at some point and had one of those Jimmy Neutron think moments. I don't know. I just think Crow Country's a cool game with a cool twist. Yeah. Aiden, you can cut back into your review at any moment.
Mara is one mystery, but in the grand scheme of things, she's a minor player in a cosmic game. One of the big mysteries is 2106, a number that's first encountered early in the game, scrawled in blood. On first glance, this appears to be a keypad code, like dozens of others you work out throughout the game. Perhaps the craziest being the final one, which is found by cracking a code hidden in a series of projector slides by comparing their numbers, and the funniest of which is the keypad, which has been reset to its default configuration. If this default code is explicitly set anywhere, I never saw it, but the code itself is as easy as 1, 2, 3, 4. However, the keypads in the game are all 1 to 9. Not a single one has a 0 on it, and as you explore, you'll see the number more and more often, with one room in particular, a maintenance hallway connecting the electrical room and break room, getting a new one each time you pass through, and it's one of the game's greatest mysteries. Throughout the journey through Crow Country, Mara meets numerous characters who are all just as dodgy as her and wonderfully memorable. Julie, Crow's concerned daughter, Natalie, a lawyer representing Mara's family, who somehow doesn't recognize her because of her dyed hair, Marvin, Crow's accountant, who's on the hook for his schemes and who goes crazy and kills Harrison eventually, and Tolman, an engineer under Crow, who is rough towards Mara in an attempt to get her to stop digging, but in a way that's largely out of concern for her and guilt for his involvement in everything, who's definitely the most interesting character of the story, even if he's equally evasive about everything going on. Much like Resident Evil's Spencer Mansion, Crow Country is a small puzzle box. It can be ran end-to-end in maybe 30 seconds, if that, but loops in on itself so often that you're always finding a new route, a new shortcut, a new secret. Each area holds plenty to see and do, and I don't want to ruin the fun of that exploration for a game so new, but I do need to touch on some late game stuff. The underground area is a wonderful mess, a series of catwalks that connect to the roots, of which there are 7 under Crow Country, a sort of living organism made of metal and gold that rise from the ground, and each one of which has a little room surrounding it that has something to see or do as part of a later puzzle. Crow's scheme is one of simple greed. He's been harvesting gold from the roots and laundering it through Marv, with the theme park above merely being a cover for the operation to divert attention. Crow could have easily been a simple villain, a Wesker type who dreams of destroying and dominating the world, creating super soldiers, but he's an almost tragic character. In his office, one of the last areas of the game, the final root still pokes above the ground, unharvested, with a small section of his office dedicated to it, a campfire burning near it, a final checkpoint, as are all sources of fire and warmth, and with a diary describing his and his father's surveying of junk land he bought that led them into stumbling across the roots. Despite his blind greed, hidden, tucked in a corner, Crow holds on to memories of that time with his father as good ones, and holds one root untouched sentimentally. It's kind of a lovely moment for Crow, and in the end we get our long-awaited confrontation with him for infecting Mara and every other survivor we've met throughout the game with whatever it is the root has created. The game ends almost perfectly. You meet Crow, partially mutated from exposure to the pit at the center of the roots, who has spent a lot of time regretting and attempting to atone for his crimes. Harvesting the roots was an act of greed, but the first guest to arrive from the pit, while mutated, came out much less so, as harvesting of the roots had just begun. The guests are time travelers from the year 2106, a time when the Earth has become all but uninhabitable, and the pit was their means of coming back to the past to fix the future, although with the destruction of the roots, each one came out more and more mutated until they were nothing but screeching blobs. Somehow even this didn't stop Crow. He continued. He mined out the roots, but even he has a limit. When you finally find Crow, he's sitting in a chair at the end of the world, a potentially doomed world he created. He thinks Mara came to kill him. She is not, and he spent years developing a cure for the disease he's unleashed by destroying the roots. 5 vials, enough for each survivor, but not himself, and wishing to see the other side, he jumps into the pit. I kind of wish this was it. I wish it ended with Crow leaving a new hope for the future. After leaving Crow Country at the end of the game, the survivors leave with the knowledge to fix the world, and depending how you want to read it, the cure may have stopped what eventually destroyed it. I don't know, but Instead, Crow comes back as a giant monster. The design is cool, but the combat really struggles to be interesting in boss fights, of which 4 of the 5 are optional, as they're virtually the only use case for the extremely valuable grenades, and this fight is really no different, easy and kinda just a miserable end for Crow, where an ambiguous one may have been much stronger. I hope that maybe Crow made it and helped fix things, or perhaps he just brought that sickness forward with him. This is perhaps the worst outcome, and one that removes the sense of wonder that the game still maintains some of through its epilogue. Crow Country also has a scoring system, much like the Silent Hill games, which unlocks rewards in New Game Plus, although to be honest, I think the scoring system is overly generous. I got 10 stars on Silent Hill 4. I beat that game with 1 save to give myself more leniency on time, on hard, didn't die, found every collectible, and tracked my kills, and all of that under 2 hours, and it was a nightmare, and immensely satisfying. I played Crow Country with my friend Grant. We were fairly drunk on a first run, saved constantly, died several times, and got an A+. The S rank only tracks deaths, heals, secrets found, and hints used. Simply play the game carefully and save scum any damage, plus find all 15 secrets, and you're golden. It's a bit disappointing it's not more insane, especially since with foreknowledge you could rip through this game in maybe 2 or 3 hours. New Game Plus has a bunch of fun extras though. For one, a new collectible is added, Crystal Crows, one of which is hidden in each above ground room. Destroying all of them nets you the laser pistol, which is very Silent Hill. There's also rank rewards. Getting a B gets you the crowbar, funny. A melee weapon, good for breaking crates for free. Getting A gets you the Crow Nade Launcher, an unlimited ammo grenade launcher that frankly decimates anything and everything, if you want to go silly mode. And S gets you the Crow Wings, which enable fast travel to visited areas, which is superfluous for a game world this small, but will probably enable some pretty silly speedruns. And these are all cute and fun bonuses for a second playthrough that I'll probably eventually do. Crow Country is absolutely fantastic. It's a bit easy, but it's a wonderful throwback to the PlayStation era of survival horror. It's atmospheric, it's got fun scares, the combat is decent enough, and Crow Country is a joy to explore. Every corner of Crow Country is filled with life, cool things to find, wild puzzles to solve, and it ties together really well with an interesting story and mystery that unravels as you get deeper. I really can't say enough good things about Crow Country. I highly recommend it in general, but especially for survival horror fans, and hopefully its success, fingers crossed, gets us more in a similar vein from SFB in the future, although I think Crow Country ends pretty conclusively, so I'm looking forward to what they make next if it is something different.